Hi everyone, it's MJ. I'm a professional doll designer and today I'm going to show you how to give this blank BJD boy a natural look face-up. This doll was a commission from a customer and it's a more realistic type of BJD than my usual anime style dolls. I actually think these semi-realistic face sculpts are easier to customize. In this video, I'll show you exactly how I achieved this look. From laying out the eyes, applying realistic and natural looking blush, and painting the face. Alright, let's get started! This customer reached out to me at one of our local BJD doll meetups and asked if she could commission a face-up for one of her BJD boys. She sent me this Ving's BJD doll head in a box along with a pair of eyes and wig and requested a natural style makeup with neutral expression for her boy. I requested the eyes and wig to be included so that I can match the eyebrows to his hair color. So this is me unboxing the wig. This is the box that the eyes came in, and here's the face. This is the back of the scalp. The eyes are already inside of the doll's head, held together with some putty. This Ving's doll is a wonderful sculpt with lots of attention to detail. He even has teeth inside of his partially open mouth. The customer also sent me his hands and feet so that I can apply blush to those parts. Blushing the hands and feet is a great way to elevate the look of your doll and make it look more realistic. It's pretty easy and I'll show you how to do that later in this video. She already sprayed the face, hands, and feet with Mr. Super Clear before sending it to me, so now I can get started on the face. The first thing I do is sharpen my brown watercolor pencil with a craft knife. This will give me a super sharp point without wasting too much pencil. Yes, a sharpener would be faster, but they eat up a lot of your pencil in the process and they tend to break your pencil sometimes. Now with my sharpened watercolor pencil, I can start sketching in the eyeliner. Use a light touch for this step and take your time to get the shape of the eyeliner exactly the way you want. You can also use an eraser to undo any mistakes. Turn the head upside down to color underneath the eyelid. You can start to see why I think these realistic face sculpts are easier to work with. All you need to do is follow the shape of the sculpt. Since I'm just following the sculpted details with my pencil, it's just a question of how long I want the eyeliner to be. I don't want to make it too long since the client wants him to look natural. Okay, and now I finished laying out the basic shape of his eyeliner. Let's go over my lines again to darken them. I'm done with my eyeliner sketch now, so I'll draw the line for his eyelid using the same dark brown watercolor pencil. I'm happy with this side, so I'll draw the other eyelid. I'm using an eraser to clean up my lines a bit. Now I think the eyelids look good, so we can move on. I'm using my brown watercolor pencil again to deepen the line between his lips. I'm following the sculpt of his mouth. I only did the right side of the mouth so you can see the difference. Now I'll do the other side. It's a bit difficult to draw inside the mouth, so I have to turn the head at different angles. Now I finished laying out all the major parts of his face, so I'll spray it with a layer of Mr. Super Clear, which is a brand of matte sealant. While I'm waiting for the face to dry outside, I can prepare my blush palette for the next step. I'll use my knife to scrape chalk pastels into a powder blush. This allows me to blend different colors to get the exact shade that I want. To make a realistic and natural blush, you need both warm and cool tones. My warm tones would be orange, red, and reddish brown. Cool tones would be pinks, ash brown, and I even added a little blue, but didn't end up using it. By the way, I added a link in this video description that lists all the supplies that I use in this video. I blended a neutral brown to use as a contour color, but I want to see how it looks on his tan skin tone. So here's an expert tip. You can test out colors on the back of the doll's head because it will be covered by a wig and you can wipe it off if necessary. Eyeshadow brushes are perfect for applying blush to dolls, and this angled brush is great for soft contouring. I'm adding brown contour to the sides of his face underneath the cheekbones. This is going to slim down the widest part of his face and bring out his cheeks more. As you can see, I'm using a very light touch now with only a little bit of pastel on my brush. To get a natural look, you want to start with your neutrals and slowly build up the color. Using too much bright color from the beginning will make him look like he has too much makeup. This is why I'm starting with the neutral brown contour. Next, we can blush his ears. Human ears have thin skin and you can see a bit of light through it, so the color of your ear always looks more warm and orange compared to the skin around it. I blended brown and orange to create this warm color, and I used a small brush to apply it inside his ear. Using a big fluffy brush to blend it out. Blending a more red color to use throughout the inside of his ear. I'm using pure orange for the outer edge of his ear. Now I'm going to do the same thing on his other ear. We can start adding some color blush to his cheeks with an orange-brown blend. Again, use a very light touch with only a little bit of pigment. Oops, I just realized that I forgot to turn on my spotlight, so now you can see the head a little bit better. Okay, continuing with the orange blush, I'm going over his cheekbones, mostly on the sides and avoiding the center of his face. I'm testing out this cool pink to use for the front of his cheeks next to the nose. It looks barely there, but it does slightly change the skin tone to be more cool, so I'm going to use this color for blushing the center of his face. Keeping warm tones like orange at the sides of the face and cool tones like pink or gray in the center will make his makeup look more natural. Now for more contouring. This time I'm using my neutral brown to contour the nostrils. Start at the top of the nostrils and blend down. We can blush around the tip of his nose with some orange color for a more realistic appearance. Notice that I'm not blushing directly on the tip of his nose, but around it. You don't want him to look like he has a stuffy nose. I added a bit too much orange here, but I can gently erase it with a kneaded eraser. Just dab it onto the area and blend it out again with a fluffy brush. To contour the sides of his nose, I'm using this cool gray color. As I mentioned before, keep the colors at the center of the face cool or neutral toned for a natural look. Contour above the nostrils, but keep it below the eyes. Don't go too high up or else his nose will look too long. We can start contouring around the eyes to add dimension. Deepening the contour and blush underneath his cheekbones. I'm using gray at the bottom half of his cheeks at the sides. I've learned from my experience as a painter that when you color a human face, the bottom half is usually more cool toned than the top half because it's slightly more in shadow. So that's why I'm shading below the cheekbones with gray. I'm using my neutral brown to broadly contour the jawline. And underneath the chin. Use a warmer tone at the edge of the jawline right before it starts making that shadow. This will give his skin a more realistic, translucent effect. Use a warm tone right behind the bottom of the ears where it meets the jawline. Use orange right behind the ear. Use your neutral brown again to contour underneath his eyes. This will make his eyes appear bigger. Concentrate on the outer edges and blend towards the center of the face. Add more contour above his eyes. Again, concentrate at the outer edges. I blended the ash brown with red to create a dusty, cool red, and I'm using this to contour the area above his eyes next to the nose. Remember, I'm using cool tones for the center of his face. Adding more warm eyeshadow to the sides of his eyes. I'm contouring below his lips to make his bottom lip stand out more. And now I'm using this tiny brush to deepen the contours around his mouth and eyes. As you can see, making realistic blush is not too hard, it's just a bit of a process. I used gray again to sort of highlight the areas right next to his nose, and blending it out with a big fluffy brush. Highlighting the chin and the top of his nose with light gray. I'm using orange to add some blush to his lips. This will act as a soft base for his lip color later. Now I'm done with his blush and I'm ready to save my work, so I'll take the head outside and spray it with my Mr. Super Clear. Here's how the head looks after the matte sealing spray dried. You can see that the colors look a bit more saturated and less chalky than before. The interaction between warm and cool tones on his face is giving him a nice healthy glow. Now let's start painting the eyes. I'm using golden fluid acrylics. I highly recommend them because they provide great coverage and have a very liquid consistency. I created this DIY Stay Wet palette using a plastic file container, wet paper towel, and a sheet of parchment paper on top. This will help keep your paint wet as you're working. I'm going to use my thinnest liner brush. You can see the size is 10/0. This brush has really thin and long bristles, so it's good for painting thin eyeliner and eyelashes. After dipping it in water, I'll use my raw umber, which is like a dark ashy brown, to go over my eyeliner drawing. Instead of starting at the ends of the eyeliner, I'm actually starting somewhere in the middle. I personally find it easier to start in the middle of the eyeliner and work outwards towards the ends because it helps me get a sharper point at the end. You can see that it's looking a little darker now. Let's go over it again and try to go more towards the ends. This eye is looking pretty good, so let's do the left eye now. I'm right-handed, so to paint the left eye, I need to flip him upside down. Now I'm using a thicker round brush to fill in more of the center eyeliner. Getting the inner corner of the eyes. I'm going in with my thicker brush again to fill in more of that space underneath the eyelid. You don't want this area to be visible when you're looking at your doll straight on. I'm fixing the end of his eyeliner a bit. I'm using a really thin layer of black to darken the eyeliner. The reason why I didn't use black right away is because I want the ends to look more feathered and natural. Using black eyeliner from the beginning will make it look like he's wearing eyeliner, which the client doesn't want. In my previous videos, I mentioned how I don't like using black as an eyeliner for dolls. That's because I usually customize anime style BJDs like this one with brightly colored eyes, and I want the makeup to match the eyes or hair. My client wanted a semi-realistic natural face, and this doll's eyes have a black pupil and he has brown hair, so that's why I'm going against my usual rule of no black. Now I'm using dark brown paint to go over his eyelid line. Go slow and take your time to get it right. If your brush hand is a bit unsteady like mine, you can rest your pinky finger on the doll's head to help stabilize your hand. You actually see me do this trick in all my videos. Let's go over that line one more time to make it darker. Getting the inner corner. Once again, I go upside down to paint the left side. You can see why I spend a lot of time sketching and laying out all the features with color pencil first, because I can just follow my drawing and it makes painting a lot easier. My paint job looks good so far, so let's save our work and spray him with another coat of Mr. Super Clear. Because his eyelid crease is drawn and not sculpted, I need to add some dimension by using shading and highlights. I used a few different brown watercolor pencils to shade the outer corners of his eyelid. Now you can see his eyelids are no longer flat but are starting to look more 3D. Do a little bit of shading in the inner part of the eyelid too. Now we're going to use a light watercolor pencils to highlight the center of the eyelids. I only added a little bit, but you can see that it's starting to make the right eye look brighter. I'm going to finish with this light peach color because it's not as harsh as the white. There's a little pink fleshy triangle that sits in the inner corner of your eyes. I'm using this reddish brown pencil to color that part in. I'm blending a few pinkish colors along his waterline to make it lighter and a bit more red. This is kind of hard to see, but I'm using white to hit the inside corner of his eye where it will touch the eyeball. This will help blend the eye chips with the face up and make him look more realistic. Now let's do the other side. The sides of his nose are very soft and not well defined, so I'm using a reddish brown to draw the sides of his nostrils. You can see the difference in the left side that I just drew versus the right side. I'm gonna blend it with his skin with a more neutral brown color. Let's take a break from the eyes and paint his lips. I love painting lips on dolls, and the best way to get a natural lip color is mixing reds, oranges, and browns with titanium buff. Painters often use this color as a base for light skin tones, but it can also be used to mix tan skin as well. It looks like a grayish almond color, kind of like almond milk. I'm going to mix it with birch sienna, cadmium red, and pyrrole orange to get a reddish tan color. With a number 4 round brush, I'm picking up a lot of water and mixing it with a paint to create a light wash. Then I'm brushing it all over his lips. Right now I want to create a thin, transparent layer as a base coat for his lips. So right now you should barely see any lip color. We will slowly build up the color as we go. For natural lips, especially with boy BJDs, it's important to slowly build up the color. If you go in with a thick, opaque layer right from the start, it's going to look like he's wearing lipstick. Let's do our second transparent layer, this time concentrating in the center of his mouth. Now you can see the lip color starting to show on his upper lip, and it's creating a gradient from the center of his mouth to the top of his lip. Let's do another layer on the bottom lip, again concentrating the color in the center of his mouth to create that gradient. I'm going to speed past this part so you can see how many layers it took to build up his lips. The top of our lips appear darker than our bottom lip because it's angled downward and in a shadow, so I'm adding more paint to the top lip. The bottom lip will have more of a gradient, so it will appear lighter. Here's the last layer, and I'm finally happy with how the lips turned out. The color looks natural and there's a nice gradient on each lip. Now I'm using dark brown with my liner brush to paint the line between his lips. This will give more contrast in his lips and make them stand out more. It took a few layers to get the line as dark as I want. Now let's do the other side. I'm also drawing a dark line in the middle of his lips right above the teeth. I'm trying to fill in the area around his teeth, but it was really hard to reach those spots. Notice that I'm not painting his teeth at all. Even though they're the same color as his original skin tone, after I'm done painting they'll actually read as white because they're surrounded by dark color. His teeth don't need to stand out because they're so far inside his mouth. I blended a slightly darker lip color to shade right next to the mouth line. This is to give more contrast to the lips. Again, I'm working with watered down thin layers to preserve the lip gradient. Let's skip past me blending the gradient. I'm using some darker brown paint to shade just the corners of his mouth. I darkened the mouth line again on his left side. You can see how the high contrast is making his mouth stand out more on the left side. So now I'll darken the right side. The sculpt of his bottom lip is actually a bit narrow. I want to make his bottom lip appear wider and more full, so I'm using light and dark watercolor pencils to widen the bottom lip and create a bit more contrast. Going back to his eyes, I'm using light pencils to highlight the skin right underneath the inner corner of his eyes. This will make his eyes seem more happy and bright. Using some darker colors to shade beneath his eyes, I'm concentrating the color on the outer edges. This will blend with his eyeliner to make his makeup look more natural. Back to his lips again, I'm using a light peach color to highlight above his lips. This will make his top lip stand out and appear more full. At this point, I'll save my work again with Mr. Super Clear. So after the spray dried, I noticed that his eyeliner looked too ashy and gray, so I mixed a more saturated color using red and black and painted it on the right eye. I like this new color a lot better, so I'll paint it over the left eye now. Natural lips, like without any fillers, will have some vertical wrinkles in them, so I'm lightly drawing those wrinkles with a darker red pencil. Let's speed past me drawing the rest of the lines on his bottom lip. You can see that the wrinkles are there, but not too dark or noticeable. Let's speed through me drawing the wrinkles in his top lip. So here's the end result. Now let's draw his eyelashes with a dark brown watercolor pencil. Make sure your pencil is really sharp to get thin lines and use a light touch. Here's how the right eye looks with eyelashes. Now let's draw the left eyelashes. Here's how the eyelashes look. They're a little light, so I'm going to seal the face again with Mr. Super Clear so that I can darken those lashes with paint. I already painted over the right eyelashes. You can see the difference between the left and right eye. Here's how it looks after I painted over the left lashes. It's looking a lot better, but if you paint in some white eyelashes in between the dark ones, you'll make the eyelashes stand out more. I'm actually using titanium buff instead of white for a more natural look. You can see the lashes on the right eye stand out and look brighter than the left eye. Now for the eyebrows, I'm using a dark brown watercolor pencil to create a base color for the brows. Even though he has dark brown hair, don't go too dark with your pencil at this stage because you'll be painting in the individual hairs later, which will really darken the brows. Here's how the first eyebrow looks. Now let's speed through the other brow. I'm satisfied with the brow shape, so let's spray with Mr. Super Clear and paint the eyebrow hairs. I already painted the hairs on one eyebrow, and like I told you before, it makes his brows look much darker. If you want to have a lighter look, I would space out the hairs so they aren't as densely packed. Let's speed paint through his left eyebrow. His brows are now looking exactly how I want them to, so let's move on to the freckles. To create realistic looking freckles, you actually need two different shades of brown. I'm using a neutral brown and a reddish brown watercolor pencils. As you're drawing the freckles, vary the size of the dots as well as how blurry they are. Here's how the freckles look on his right cheek. Let's do the other cheek now. The client wanted light freckles, so I'm happy with how they look on his cheeks. Let's put some freckles on his nose now. I'm just adding them to the top of his nose. I'm adding some more highlight to his bottom lip and over his top lip. And now we're getting to the finishing touches of his face. After spraying with Mr. Super Clear, we can add some gloss to his eyes and lips. I always use an old crappy brush for my liquid gloss because it tends to mess up my brushes. I have this old one that I saved from a long time ago. The client didn't want anything too glossy, so to create a semi-gloss effect, I brushed the liquid gloss over his eyeliner and then dabbed it with my finger. I did several layers of this to get a semi-gloss effect. Now I'm going to use a similar method for his lips. I'm brushing on the gloss, then using a dry paper towel to dab it. It took several layers to give his lips a good semi-gloss. Here's how his lips look after I finish the gloss. They look moisturized like he put on chapstick, but they're not super glossy. I'll quickly show you how I added blushing to his feet and hands to make them look more realistic. Start with a warm brown color and start brushing it all over the bottom of his toes. Then go in with an orange right in between the toes. Also get the line where the toes meet his foot. Use orange all over the bottom of his foot and at the sides just around the bottom. And now start. The top of the foot should be a cooler shade, so I'm using my cool light pink at the top of his foot. Start behind the toes and blend towards his ankle. Use the same cool pink in between the ridges at the top of his foot. Use orange between the toes again. I'm concentrating the color between the toes and avoiding the top of the toes. Just a little bit of orange at the tips of the toes, making the color in all the dips and wrinkles deeper. Here's a comparison of both his feet so you can see the difference. Now I'll finish the other foot off camera and show you how to blush the hands. It's the same process as the feet. I'm starting with a warm color at the palm of the hand. I do a light wash all over the palm, and then start making the color deeper, starting where the palm meets the fingers. Get all the wrinkles in between the finger segments. Blush the sides of each finger and thumb. And finally the tips of the fingers. Here's the final look of his hands. I added a cool pink color at the tops of his hands around the knuckles. The warm and cool areas of blush help them look more realistic. Here's the finished boy. I put on his eyes and wig to show you his final look. I delivered it to my client yesterday and she was really pleased with how handsome he turned out. I love how his expression seems to change a little bit when you look at him from different angles. It kinda goes from neutral to slightly smiling. What do you guys think of my face up? Do you want to see me customize more realistic dolls in the future? I'm working on more doll makeup tutorials for my Mian Mian animal dolls, so stay tuned for those process videos. Thanks for watching and see you next time!